I think it was Ernest Hemingway that said, write hard and clear about what hurts. And I think as slam poets, we all have this desire to speak our truth. And there's nothing more therapeutic than telling the most vulnerable stuff about ourselves to a group of strangers. And I really feel like with Allen Ginsberg, back in the 50s, he was a queer poet that was dying to express himself. And eventually the levee broke and he created the howl. And ever since that moment, poetry changed, all of this changed. And Karl Woodeye is sort of my experiment doing that. So at a certain point, you just have to say fuck it and start talking about what matters. So this poem is called Anger. It's a piece about growing up in a verbally abusive household. My dad would yell a lot. He would yell at my mother too. He would get violently mad about almost anything. He would cuss loudly at inanimate objects. He would demean my mother and I for not being his idea of smart. We were never as sharp as he would have liked and never able to figure things out as quickly as him. I remember my dad buying me a beat-up old Jeep that needed some work done on it, and it was going to serve as a project for the two of us to work on together. It was nice at times, you know, working on old cars with my pops, the classic hallmark image of a father and son. Throughout the majority of the project, he yelled at me endlessly and made me feel stupid for not knowing my way around a car the way he did. He claimed that my schooling was worthless. If I couldn't do basic stuff like woodworking and automotive repairs, I was next to worthless in his eyes, as if intelligence was defined only by numbers, measurements, and logic, algorithms, and analytics, circuit boards, and silicon. I remember looking myself in the mirror at night and wondering if I would ever be good enough for him. Years later, I still look in the mirror and I still wonder the same thing. So I drew away. I held the flashlight. I tightened the bolts. I smiled the whole time until it was done and the Jeep was drivable. All the while dreaming of being an artist, a creative sort, just to rebel against my aggressive father, to be anything but what he was. It didn't matter to me because everything handy I could become just reminded me of him. He viewed art and creativity as a waste of talent, and I've spent the rest of my life defying his ideology. I don't know how successful I've been, but even so, with all the rebellion, I will always have my father in my soul. I will always hear his nasty tone of voice every time I get out of hand, every time I lose my temper and black out into a moment of rage and anguish. I will always be my father's son, whether I like it or not. My instincts will always bang violently at the back door of my mind, and I will spend the rest of my life fighting to keep them outside, fighting to keep them out of the house of my life, away from my children and away from my wife. I will fight to keep them away from strangers, and especially away from my work. It's amazing how in those first few years those first few years of childhood, we learn things that we will spend the rest of our lives dealing with. He made an impression on me, like words imprinted into a cement walkway, a footstep on a coral reef, or an unwanted tattoo. This is my forever. I remember watching him verbally abuse my mother. This was at a time when I was realizing how much the things he did to me were coming out in my own relationships, and it became especially painful. I remember holding a clenched fist and yelling at him, "Enough! Stop talking to my mother like that, you disrespectful fucking asshole!" This world belonged to him. This household belonged to him. My father and I would be out running errands, and he would encounter something he wanted to buy, and he would always tell the person behind the counter that he would have to check with the boss lady first before he could purchase it. What flaming bullshit that was. He knew it didn't matter. He could do what he wanted, but for some reason he wanted to keep up this impression that the household was ran by my mother. It was a lie disguised as a marriage. At my wedding, he gave a speech, one that I greatly appreciated, one where he said for the first time in my adult life that he was proud of me. I, to this day, still remember those words. In the same speech, he talked about how to treat your wife. He made the entire crowd of over 100 people laugh hysterically with his made-up speech about always putting your wife's opinions first. He said, "Never forget these words. Yes, dear." And he followed it with, "You're right." Yes, it was funny, but deep down in my soul, I knew it was all a lie. In my house, my mother was always wrong. Same with me. I was always a lesser human in his eyes. He wanted a quiet, subdued child. What he got was a loud and opinionated person. Yes, he can fix anything. He has Anakin Skywalker syndrome, as I always jokingly refer to it. He can seriously fix anything. He can perform maintenance on any electrical or mechanical device, but when it comes to the human heart, he is a wandering blind man with no home and no shelter. I throw temper tantrums. I yell at things, dogs, furniture that always insist on bruising my toes when I walk barefoot through my house at night. I scream when something bad happens. I violently breathe through my tightened teeth when I cannot get my computer to do what I want it to do. I move in aggressive movements when I'm flustered and frustrated. I look like a lunatic, and I'm doing everything in my power to own that behavior. I do blame my father, but I also blame his father and my grandfather's father for creating a lineage of angry men. I will do everything in my power to make sure my daughter and any other children I bring into this world do not turn out the way that I am. I will do anything to break that chain and stop the cycle, that cycle that has gone on for far too many generations. Thank you.